All right, Boker Tov, everybody. Today's shiur is Le'ilui Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram ben Meretzi Rachalea. Also, for Refuah Shlema for Adiel Yitzchak ben Anat Esther and Yeshayahu Zev ben Chana Dvora. Should have a Refuah Shlema in Kol Cholei Yisrael. We decided to do today's shiur on Zoom for two reasons. One was the weather, which I guess he jinxed it because right now it's blue sky and sunny, but it was supposed to be pouring and windy like the last couple of days. And also because the the incidence of specifically here in Ma'ale Adumim, of the virus, and I am in an institution and I meet boys where it's had a bit of a breakout, small compared to most, but still there, and trying to minimize the exposure for everybody. So thank you for being here this morning on Zoom, and for anybody who will hear this later on YouTube, welcome to you as well. So we are near the end of Parak Chet, chapter 8. It's a very short parak. We're near the beginning and near the end, I guess. You take a look on the little booklet, it's page 43. It is the paragraph that starts with the words V'hinei ein lecha Adam. V'hinei ein lecha Adam, page 43, or whatever printing you're using. This chapter, again, brief as it is basically copy-paste or ditto for the chapter that discussed those things that, how we were able to acquire the midah of zehirut, of being careful not to do things we shouldn't. He basically says the same methods are used over here. And one of the things he stressed last week that we talked about had to do with the idea that one of the things we can do to increase our field of wanting to do mitzvot, to get closer to Hashem, is the idea that when we look around and we look at our lives and we see what we need to be thankful for, what Hashem has done for us in this world, that it increases our love for Hashem, and therefore we will feel more prone to do mitzvot taseh, and stay away from mitzvot lo taseh as well as a side benefit. And that's nice. That's a nice thought. But does it apply to everybody? Some people just have a very hard time because of their circumstances in life. It's kind of hard to see the good in life for some people, sadly. So let's take a look. Again, paragraph starts, V'hinei ein lecha Adam, parak Chet, page 43 in the little booklet. There's no person, in no matter what situation he or she may find himself in, whether he's poor or rich, whether he's healthy or ill, who will not be able to see the great wonders in his or her situation. It's a pretty broad statement. That also means, God forbid, a person's lying in bed sick, person has COVID, a person, God forbid, lost an eye, a person chas chalila, whatever, just fill in the blank. It's not saying look around at life and in general you could see the good that Hashem has done or does for people. It says it's impossible. You won't see his own situation for what it is and be grateful to Hashem for all that Hashem does for him or her in his or her situation. So that's the part where it can be a little bit sticky. He's going to explain. How does a poor person look around and say, wow, I am so thankful to Hashem for all the good in my life. I get to go to the street corner. I put my hand out. I get to go through lahavdil chas chalila, go through the dumpster to find food. Hashem is so good to me. I know I'm being a little bit facetious, but let's see what he says. Continuing in the paragraph, again, for those who are joining now, we're in the paragraph near the end of parak, or the middle, parak Chet, V'hinei ein lecha Adam. Ki ha'ashir v'habari, the person who's wealthy, person who is healthy, first of all, they're already coming from a point of positive. The point of positive is they have money, they have parnasa, they have a home, they have their health. That alone, forget everything else, is that they have to be thankful to Hashem. But a poor person has a requirement to Hashem. Shafilu be'onyo mamtzilo parnasato derech nes v'fele ve'eno manicho lamut bera'av. The fact that this poor person somehow ends up with food, and I'm adding to him now, adds a place to stay, people who care, people who want to do chesed with the individual, that alone should say to Hashem, wow, to that person, look at how Hashem still watches over. No matter how bad my situation is, Hashem is always there for me. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that many people go through life with the perspective of, unfortunately, hopefully it's not many, some, God doesn't care about me, God doesn't like me, Hashem doesn't pay attention to me, because they don't have parnasa, they don't have a shidduch, they have a lousy home life, they fill in the blank. They didn't get accepted to their favorite university, they didn't get placed in the medical place they want to be placed. There's a whole laundry list of things that people can be upset about with Hashem that they didn't have happen yet. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that? So before we continue, I think it's important to talk about that for a minute. You know, there's the statement, and I don't mean to use it here, but you know, it could always be worse, chas v'shalom, right? No matter what person's situation is, it could always be worse. But that's not very comforting. It's not comforting to a person who is looking for a shidduch for many years, and someone keeps telling them, don't worry, the right one's going to come along. It's not comforting for the person who came from the 25th job interview in a row and they got rejected again. Don't worry, the right job is going to come along. That's not a very comforting feeling. And not only that, it leads the person to think or to feel that, you know, God's kind of abandoned that individual. So for those of you who are familiar with a series of books written by Rav Arush, he's who runs Chucha Chesed in Yerushalayim, is the books in English, the Garden of Gratitude. Looking over here, I have all these books, one of which changed my life many years ago. One of his mantras over and over and over is, and it's very difficult, is that no matter what situation you're in, it's exactly what Hashem wants for you at that moment. You don't have the job because there is something waiting for you. You don't have the shidduch because that means the person you're supposed to meet, you weren't supposed to meet yet until that moment. And you're supposed, not only that, he goes a step further. You should thank Hashem that you don't have that job yet. You should thank Hashem you don't have X, whatever it might be, because that's what Hashem has decided for you for that moment. It's not the right time. It's not the right place. Again, it's a very hard mindset to wrap your head around. But look what he says now. He says a person who's lying in bed sick, take a look where it says, hacholeh. Hacholeh, the person who's sick, you might think that, look, I'm lying in bed sick. Obviously, what do I have to give thanks for? I'm in traction for 6 months. The guy's alive. The person's alive. If he has the wherewithal to think, he said, look, Hashem, yes, I'm sick. Yes, I know I have the flu. I have whatever the machala might be, but at least I'm alive. I could still be here. I could be here to do mitzvot. Now, I'm not talking about a person who's lying in bed suffering and pain and all. I don't want to get into that because there are different perspectives one can have on that, and you have to be pretty good with emunah. Talking about, when you talk about yisurin. Yisurin are pain and travail that a person goes through in this world. That's more of a philosophical discussion I don't want to get into today. But we have to understand that there's nothing muvan me'elav. The fact that this person, let's say someone's in the hospital because they have a very bad case of the flu. The fact that the machine works, that they are an IV drip, the fact that the bed goes up and down, that the doctor gets there, that the transport takes them to their extra, whatever it is. These things, for those even, the person has to be thankful to Hashem that it worked, or that it works. And all other things like this. To the point where there's no one who, if he's honest with himself, realizes that there's no such thing that a person does not have to be grateful to Hashem for his life, for what he has. And when you look at these good things Hashem gives us, the ability to breathe, our bodies work, even if a person, God forbid, is sick. Let's say a person has a gastro problem, okay? But they can walk. They can see, they can hear, they can touch, they can taste. The person will be infused with the feeling, awoken to the feeling to really want to lehizdares. Again, we said there's no real good English word for this, but to act in a zariz fashion to serve Hashem, as I wrote before, even more so when you realize and think about that all this goodness is all in Hashem's hands. You know, when we come to Pesach, there is a difference in the nusach of one word and few words, but especially one word in different Haggadot. One says halach ma'anya and one says kehalach ma'anya. But either way, the idea is based on this idea that a person was poor and they were rich, and they say, look, this is what we had, you know, this is what we used to have, but now look at where we're at. We have to thank Hashem. Even more so when it's a person who was poor, who became wealthy, who became poor, it's even a greater challenge. I know I have a friend who, more than one, here in Israel, who pretty much lost everything. Lost his parnasa, he was a pretty wealthy guy. He lost his parnasa, and I talk to him once in a while still. This happened a number of years ago. His perspective is mind-blowing to me. It is, because he's like, okay, this is what Hashem wanted for me. It's not meant to be. By the way, there are many people who are very wealthy who will tell you that they were wealthy and they went through more than one time where they lost everything and they gained back. Some of you may be familiar with Berkovich. What's her first name? The paraglider, the Paralympic woman. Can't remember her name. She's originally from Italy. Anyways, so here's a woman who was living not in Israel, who was running. I heard her speak. She's an unbelievable speaker. She was, I think, 14 years old, and she was running in the early morning to catch a train to get to school in the snow, and she literally slipped under the train and lost her legs. And she was lying there for hours because it's very early and there was nobody around. It was a remote stop until they finally got her. She was praying to God that she should be, if he saves her, she will make, dedicate her life to whatever it might be. She did not have prosthetics as far as I know. And she's a Paralympic champ multiple times. She made Aliyah. She went to the IDF, and they were just starting the Sarel program, and she joined the Sarel, and they kept telling her no, and she said yes. And I heard her speak. She's not religious, but it was very much that this is what God wanted for my life, and this is what I need to do. So it's taking what we have that Hashem has given us and really turning it around and making something positive. Is it easy? I'm not saying it's easy. Very few things in life are very easy, but the more important something is, the more difficult it is, the more work it is. The more we think about it, the more we realize how much we need this, and how much we need Hashem and what He does for us, how much He gives us. It doesn't come from somebody else. If you work for an individual, I worked. I mentioned many times, I worked in the business world for a total of about 17 years before I went into becoming a rabbi of a shul. And I worked for two main bosses, both of whom literally signed my check. And of course, I was grateful to them. I was grateful to them. They gave me a job. I was grateful that I had parnasah. But at the same time, I had to recognize that they were just the shaliach. They were just the shaliach for this. And it all comes from Hashem. A fast story. And I've told this story before, but not in this class. So some of you in different classes heard this, so you have to listen anyways, I guess. When our oldest daughter had her bat mitzvah, and only did something for the bat mitzvah because as Rabbi Bashol, we were invited to a million smachot, so we wanted to give back. So he decided to make an open house at the shul for her bat mitzvah. And we had it catered, like a person, they made food, they brought it to the shul, they set it up. And it wasn't cheap. I make up a number. Let's just use $100. It's obviously more than $100. So when the caterer came to the house to get paid, so I wrote the check and I handed it to him, and I had a big smile on my face. And he said, "Rabbi, what's the smile? Most people are crying when they give you their money." So I said, "I'll be honest with you, Walter. I said, this money has been sitting in my account since I put it in there. And I was just it was just there to be held for you. It's your money being held in my account. And now I get to finish my shlichut. And I give it to you now. It's in your hands now. It wasn't mine. It was all. When a person slips, God forbid, and gets their coat dirty and he has to go to the dry cleaners, and then they have to pay 50 shekel or 100 shekel to pay to clean it, that 100 shekel was in your account. For whatever reason, Hashem needed that 100 shekel to be in the hands of the dry cleaner. And he did it by the entzaut, of the means of your having to get your coat wet or dirty and having it into that dry cleaner's hands. Hashem moves the world around. Hashem makes things happen. It does not contradict, of course, our free choice, our bechira choshit, which I talked about last night a little bit in Tanya. But we do have to recognize that absolutely everything is from Hashem. If we spend X amount of shekel on something, that's what was meant to be. It says, for sure, we won't be lazy. We won't get lazy in our way of our requirement of serving Hashem. But we won't even shortchange God, so to speak. Instead of doing the mitzvah, the best way we'll do it. Okay, look, I was yotzei the mitzvah. I did what I had to do the bare minimum. Again, I like to try to compare the service of Hashem or the way we relate to Hashem to relationships. And if you have a relationship, if you're married, or you have children, you have siblings, do you want their love to be expressed in the bare minimum, the thank you in the bare minimum? Or do you want it to be where you show your love, or you show your thank you as best as possible? If you remember in the early section, and we talked about zehirut, he divided the people into three categories. And the same thing we could learn over here. Those who are of complete mind, they do everything l'shem Hashem. How are they awoken? They are awoken through the idea of their requirement to serve Hashem and the value of their actions. The next level down. Remember the people we said that we're going to go to the next world, Olam Haba. It's another small fraction of people who they'd be embarrassed when they get there if they don't do the right thing in this world, end up with less status in the next world. So other people are moved to serve Hashem because they don't want to end up on the short end of the stick when they get to the next world. I don't know if I know any people like that, but I guess there are. And to the majority, the vast majority of people, they feel they should be doing these mitzvot, or they're moved to do mitzvot. Mitzad olam hazeh utzrachav, kinyan shepirashti shem lamal, as I already explained before. Meaning, we understand that we have a tafkid here in this world. Hashem placed us in this world. People do things for sachar and onesh, or not for onesh. That's not necessarily the greatest motivator. It should be done. Remember, we talked about this before, that we talk about serving Hashem two different ways, both out of yirah, of fear, and out of ahava, out of love. The best way of serving Hashem is both. The second best way is mitoch ahava. Third would be, I guess, out of yirah. I don't mean to categorize them like that because they really all have their own place. But in general terms, I'm going to just say it like that. Now, as is his way already, we've seen in Zehirut, and now he's going to do this with Zrizut, and we'll do it with every other step. He's going to go into the topic of what will be those things that get in our way. What prevents us from being Zariz? Now, here you'll see, if you turn the pages, you'll see it's not a long chapter, but it's a decent-sized chapter. You would think he'd just say, cut and paste. Just like I said by Zehirut, just do the opposite or be aware of the opposite, but it's not. You cannot say those things that prevent you from or enable you to do a ve'ra that you have to be careful of are the same methods that have to be used when it comes to being careful to do a mitzvah, because that's a different story. So let's see what he says. Perek Tet, chapter 9. This is the one advantage of being at home, to sit and drink coffee while I talk to some people on a screen. This is now he's going to discuss and explain those things that prevent somebody and distance someone from being able to do a mitzvah, not just to do it, but to get to do it as soon as possible, at its first possible opportunity, to do it the right way. Now, there's one expression that's made up of 3 words that, there's a Midrash tells us that when a baby is in utero, that a malach teaches all the Torah, entire Torah to the baby. And just before they're born, the malach touches the lip and makes the little indentation, and they forget all the Torah, and they spend the rest of their lives trying to learn and recall all the Torah. But I think that Israeli babies have a little bit other things that Hashem does for them when they are in utero. Number 1, they teach the child to go like this. You want this? Right, it's the shoulder. That's first. That's even before they can talk. The next one, and this is what they teach, they implant a chip in the child's brain. You don't know this, that the malach implants a chip in the child's brain. When they get to a certain age, maybe about 7 or 8, they say the 3 words that every teacher and every parent wants to hear. Eni koach. Like, I don't have the strength to do that. Eni koach. And then you get the double whammy of the eni koach, the shoulder, and the eni koach. We laugh about it, but we do the same thing without necessarily verbalizing it, right? It's time to do X. Eni koach, right? But we do. These are the things that get in our way. We get in our way. He already mentioned this in the first chapter of this section. Take a look. The biggest thing that gets in our way of being zariz are those things that increase or cause us to be, or that we're laziness. And the biggest of all those lazy infused actions in our body, our need, our desire, our wish to just physically chill and rest, v'sinat hatorach, and hating exertion, v'havata idunim b'tashlum kol tinahem, and just liking those things that just make us comfy. Some of you will understand this reference, just like sitting on the couch watching Oprah eating bonbons. Okay, that's the life, right? Now, let me preface this chapter with a statement, which is, there's nothing wrong with relaxation. There's nothing wrong with recreation. I pronounced it on purpose like that, because recreation is recreating. You're recreating yourself because you were at some point, and now you're hopefully infusing yourself with some strength. We've talked about this before in this class and other classes, that everything that we do can be done l'shem Hashem. Judy Lewin had mentioned to me after class a few weeks ago, and I waited till now, Judy, to mention this, and she was correct, and I didn't mention at the time, that anything that we do can have a l'shem shamayim aspect, that we're doing it because of Hashem. Exercise, eating, sleeping, all those things can be done. I want to be healthy so I can be able to daven. I want to be healthy so I can do my chesed act. All these things can be. But when we do these things only because we want to serve ourselves, I just want to lie on the couch for a few hours. Look, I want to see the entire series of 24 over the period of the next 5 days without moving off the couch or even going to the bathroom or reading or eating. Okay, that's a little mugzam. See March 2020, right? The beginning of Corona. A person doesn't want to exert themselves. The same person who's willing to walk or jog 10 kilometers, when it says like, okay, why don't you just go next door and do X to help somebody? I'm really comfortable on the couch. These are the things that get in our way. Because a person who has that perspective, it's going to weigh on him, literally weigh on him. It's going to get in the way of his service of Hashem. Whoever wants to sit and just luxuriate over a meal, just spend so much time sitting around doing nothing and just eating, and sleeps without any worries, any problems, just kind of sleep the day away. And if he doesn't, he refuses to go anywhere unless he has to go. A person who stays up till 4 o'clock in the morning playing video games or reading or just doing shtuyot, not the reading shtuyot, but just wasting their time, and decides they're going to sleep until 12 o'clock and then start their day, they're not going to be getting up to go to shul. They're not going to be getting up to daven on time. They're not going to put on tefillin necessarily on time while you have all day. They're also, they're eating the meal. Comes time for mincha. Time is running short. I davened yesterday because they're too busy and happy to be eating. I'm going to come back to that sentence in a minute. Unless it's like, I'm going to use my own words now, like critical to go out and to do a certain mitzvah to leave their house. Don't even think about it, saying that kind of person is going to hurry up to go to some mitzvah or to go learn. It doesn't work that way. Person, again, is their own worst enemy when it comes to, they get in the way of themselves. Now, you'll notice he uses interesting words here. He says this type of person is not necessarily interested to shorten his meal, in order that he should go to mincha, which means late in the afternoon. Now, we know that mincha can be started 1/2 hour after halachak midday and can be said until sunset. That's the general rule. So a person may be eating a meal, let's say mincha is at 6:30, and a person's eating their meal at 6, and they're having a nice long meal, and oh, that's right, mincha. It's okay. I'm eating now. Hashem will understand. But why does he say mincha ben arbaim? Well, first of all, just on a practical sense, we're talking about early mincha. He's eating then at 12:30 or 12 o'clock. Okay, he does have a long time still but it's still better if you can. Some people say, by the way, better the early mincha. Some say or later mincha, but either one are fine. But he specifically mentions the word ben ha'arbaim. Eliyahu Navi al Har Carmel. I'm sure you all know this story, where there were the prophets of Baal, 400 Nevi'ei Baal, who went out the top on Har Carmel, the Carmel Mountains, and there was a test to determine who was the real God. Was it Baal or was it Hashem? So the people of Baal built an altar, and Eliyahu built an altar. And the deal was, whoever would have fire come down from heaven and consume the offering that was on their altar, then that would be the one to prove who in fact was the real God. So it says that the people from Baal built their altar, and they cried out to God, and they cried out to Baal, and Eliyahu mocks them and says, maybe he's sleeping, maybe cry a little louder. So they cry out louder, nothing happens. Then Eliyahu says, okay, bring some water and pour water on my mizbeach. And they poured water. He says, do it again. They poured water again. Do it again. And for the third time, they pour water. And he calls it Hashem, and fire comes down and consumes what is on the mizbeach. And it says that the V'yei Baal all said, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. That's where the expression, the words come from. It's from right there in that story. That entire story is prefaced with the words, Vayihi ba'alot hamincha. It was at the time of mincha. Well, I don't care what time. It's almost no other place you see in Tanakh. It says, well, at 4:13 in the afternoon, this happened. Almost nowhere else. It's to teach us, first of all, it says that Lo ne'ene Eliyahu ela mipnei tfilat hamincha. He was very careful in mincha. But it also tells us something about who we are as Jews in our relationship with Hashem. I heard one time, I'll explain what I mean. I heard someone say something that I partially agree with and not necessarily, but I'm just going to say it. He says, what makes somebody, or what expresses an individual who really does want to serve Hashem and not just going through the motions? He says it's mincha and sudash lishit. Why? Because shacharit, you wake up, okay, when you wake up in the morning, you daven. And by the way, I'm talking about people who have a requirement to daven 3 times a day. This does not necessarily include women who have a different chiyuv, and Sfaradim and Ashkenazim are different. I'm just talking in general now. So when you wake up in the morning, you have shacharit. Before you go to sleep, you didn't daven Marav, okay, got to daven Marav. Mincha, especially in the winter, you basically have to stop the middle of your day and think. You have to plan for it. You have to make sure you can take those few minutes to stop and daven. Sudash Lishit, We just had this last week. We were away for Shabbat. And we had some bit for a bar mitzvah, very nice meals Friday night and Shabbat morning. And 45 minutes later, Sudash Lashit, the way it works. And we sat down, we had food again. Now, as Halakha says, Mishen Chacham Einav Berosho, literally means you have your eyes in your heads. You don't fill up too much. So you have room for Sudash Lashit, even if it's a kazayit. Nevertheless, it's taking the time to sit down and eat something, specifically because it's a mitzvah. So what he's also intimating here is that you not only, I think, and I haven't seen this in commentaries, but I haven't read all the commentaries on Mesilat Yesharim, there are many. I think that one of the reasons he's mentioning this, not just in a practical sense that we're talking about, you're going to run out of time if you don't go to early, if you're eating later in the day before mincha time, because it's Bein Arba'im, but also this hint of Vahi Balot Mincha, this whole time period of Eliyahu Navi and our need to stop and think and put God into our timetable. There have been over the years people who I've talked. I did this in shul in Chicago a few times. It didn't go long. There are a couple of people here in Israel over the last 2 years who we talked about specifically mincha. They were not very careful in davening mincha. And I said, let me ask you a question. If you had a reminder, would you daven? He says, probably. So I started something every day. I sent a text at the same time, just said mincha. What they did or didn't, and it wasn't my job. Didn't mean anything to me. You do what you have to do, but I need to do my part. I need to remind you. And that, why did I just not tell them put it into their own phone? Because I wanted them to feel a sense of, oh, okay, that's right. He took the time to remind me, but that's mitoch shelo lishma balishma. Because you do something maybe not for the right reasons, then eventually you say, you know what? And he did. One of them said to me, you know, you don't have to remind. I did it for like a couple of weeks. He said, it's okay. I got this. And he put it in his own phone and he started a reminder. Then he didn't need reminders because it became a part of who he was. That's part of what's going on here. We have to come up with things that we know get in our way. If I know, for example, that if I sit, I'm just making this up, it's not true, that if I sit down on the couch at 7:30, I'm not getting up from that couch till I go to sleep, but I didn't do my Rambam Yomi, or I didn't do my Daf, or whatever it might be, it's like, so don't sit down on the couch at 7:30, sit somewhere else. We do this, sometimes these little shifts, these little changes are able to make us think differently. And I'm going to show you an example. I would do this if we were in person, but I did this a couple of times in classes. So I'm just going to tell you, and you can try this yourself, but you can also imagine it now. I want you to picture yourself taking a pen or pencil and signing your name in English, not in Hebrew. Signing your name in English, cursive, right? Pretty easy. Most people can do that with their eyes closed and singing the ABCs at the same time because it's natural. Now, take that same pen, put it in your other hand. Don't sing the ABCs. Keep your eyes open. And now I want you to sign your name. You're going to be thinking like, wait, do I have to move my hand this way or that way? How do I make this a loop for the L? How do I do the Z? Whatever it might be. First of all, that's the difference between doing something with kavanah and without, in very general terms. You're actually focused, 100% focused on what you're doing because you can't not focus when you're using your alternate hand. The other thing is that you realize that when you do something just a little different, you're doing the exact action. You're writing. You have a pen in your hand or a pencil in your hand, and you're writing on a piece of paper. It's the same action, but you're doing it a different way. You put something in the way of yourself. That changes you. It changes what you're doing. The same thing is when it comes to these things. And it could be a practical suggestion, whether it's something you are not very good at because you get in the way of yourself because of whether it's laziness or whatever else. Have someone remind you. Put your reminder in your phone. Do something about it. He's going to talk about, not about the phones, obviously, but something similar. Let's take a look. And he says right here, whoever does get into that rut of laziness and getting in his own way, he will no longer have complete control over himself in order to do the opposite of that when he needs to. Because his desire is already blocked. It's already in chains. It becomes literally, as they say here, teva sheni, second nature to not do X. It becomes second nature to be lazy. It becomes second nature, and it doesn't mean the person is lazy all the time. It could just be in one area. Ve'omnam tzarich sheyeda Now let's put it for this next paragraph. He's going to say similar to this. Let's put this into a different perspective. You are an employer, and you have an employee who's supposed to start work at 9 o'clock. They come in at 9:45. They put their feet up on the desk. They read the paper. They go make coffee. And about 11:30, they go out for an early lunch. They spend the time when they come back after lunch at 2 because they had needed a long lunch. They spend the time talking with their desk mate. And 4 o'clock, the day is going to end. And then at 4 o'clock, they come to you to be paid. How apt are you? How inclined are you to keep that person in your employ? Probably not very long. You might give that person a warning, say, look, I can't deal. You're here to work. You're not here to goof off and put your feet on the desk and have coffee every time you want and go talk to your desk mate and you go out lunch from 11:30 to 2. That's not what I hired you for. You have a job to do. And that's what you have to do. Otherwise, goodbye. Most people would not put up with that. Take a look at the next paragraph. We were not placed in this world just to relax. We are put here to work. We're put here to work. You should only act like a worker who's working for his employer. We are day laborers. In other words, what does it mean a day laborer? Let's say I hired somebody for the day. My son-in-law is a plumber, so he hired somebody, let's say, for the day to help him bust up some concrete in order to get to some pipe, whatever it might be, making it up. Now, at the end of the day, he has to pay the guy, right? By the way, al pi halacha, he has to pay that guy the same day. But if he's not going to pay him, if the guy brought a sledgehammer, he hits one time a piece of cement, and then he goes and sits down, has coffee, and he goes hits it another time 2 hours later. That's not work. He's not getting paid for that. Or a person who is the time of battle, he's getting ready to go out. Now, I did not serve in Tzahal. I wanted to. That's its own story. Another time. But a person who is on the front, or a person who is on call to be, he's going to be called up. Maybe he's going to get a tzav shmoneh. Whatever it might be, that they're sleeping with one eye open. They're eating quickly because they may need to go right out to battle. It's this idea of being zariz, to do what they have to do. Put it in a different perspective, not this. A husband and wife, they're expecting a baby. Okay, so what's the difference when she's in the 4th month or when she's in the 9th month? What's the difference of the feel in the house? In the 4th month, you don't have a go bag. You don't have your stuff all ready to run to the hospital. You didn't call the rabbi to say, what happens if I go into labor on Shabbat yet? But in the 9th month, as things are proceeding and progressing, oh, I better have a go bag, because if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to start looking for what I need to take to the hospital. It's the idea of being zariz, being prepared. But we always have things we need to do in service of Hashem. And says in Iyov, Ki Adam la'amal yulad. Man was created to work. And when you get used to this way of life, if you realize that's the perspective, imagine a guy goes to work. Okay, he's hired as an accountant, and he's working in 2-3 days. And his employer says, "No, how's it going?" He says, "I hate this job. Why? All these numbers." Well, dude, that's what you're here for. You're here as my accountant. Yeah, but there's so many numbers, and my calculator's in my pocket, and I got to take it out. I got to push the buttons, and what if it dies? I need to charge it. What? You're my accountant. That's what you're here for. Because if he has the right perspective, he will not be caught short in being prepared for what he has to do. And Chazal told us on this regarding this. This is a Mishnah, Pirkei Avot. This is the way of Torah. And I'm going to explain this in a minute. Pat b'melech tochel, bread with salt you should eat. Umayim b'mesurat tishteh, and eat and drink water in measure. V'ala'aretz tishan, and sleep on the ground. Now, does that mean, is the Mishnah telling us, what's the best way to serve God? Sleep on the ground, drink a few sips of water, have some crust of bread and dip it in salt, have a nice day, go serve God. Is that the Mishnah? No, it's not. It's not what the Mishnah means at all. It means no matter what a person's position is in, no matter where they're holding, whether they got a mansion with 25 bathrooms or they have barely anything to eat, they all have the same chiyuv to serve Hashem. The Rambam tells us that, not just the Rambam, but it's very clear in the Rambam, that every single person, no matter how healthy or unhealthy they may be, has the exact same chiyuv of Torah, of keeping mitzvot. Now, some people are turim from mitzvot at certain points, depending on their health situation, obviously. But a person lying in bed who is tzalul, someone who is clear of mind, obviously, and is conscious, instead of watching TV, which is fine to do, he can't say, well, I'm in the hospital, I don't have to learn Pashat Shabbat. It doesn't work that way. You have a chiyuv to learn. That doesn't change. Obviously, there are people in certain situations that can't, but those who can must. So he adds here that this Mishnah is trying to impress upon us to distance ourselves as much as possible from too much relaxation, too many fineries in life, too much pampering in life. There's nothing wrong with, again, any of these things. But it's when they get in the way of being who you're supposed to be, that's when it becomes a problem. Od mi mafsidei hazrizut. One more point here. People who are scared of time and things that might happen. Why? They say, oh, it's too cold outside. It's too hot outside to go do X. Maybe they'll get injured. Maybe they're going to get sick. And sometimes it's too windy. Sounds like what's going on right now. The wind, the virus. And all of these things that are similar. He says in Mishlei, a person doesn't do the service of Hashem because he says, oh, there might be a lion on the road, right? I may walk out of my house. There might be an elephant that got into me, Spenavod, might stamp on me. I better stay home. Chachamim have already condemned this terrible, this character trait. And they have assigned that action or that thought process to people who are to chataim. Mikra Mesayam in the Dichtiv, the pasuk helps this idea and says, "Pachadu b'tzion chataim, achazar re'ada chanefim. Ad shama echad minegdalim al tamido viroto oto mitpached chata'at." When he saw his student was in fear of going to do something, he said, "You're a sinner." Elal ze ne'emar betach ba'Hashem v'asei tov shchon ba'ar eretz ur'ei emunah. Loosely translated, you need to have emunah in Hashem. Now, hold on. There are some things that are legitimate. There are things that are legitimate. Not only that, we're not going to do it today. He's going to talk about yir'ah. He's going to talk a little bit more about it next week, that there are things to be afraid of in life. If it's pouring rain, it's freezing cold, and I'm not, thank God, but let's say I was sick. I wasn't feeling so good. You mean to tell me that I should schlep the shul? I don't feel, and maybe I'll get somebody else sick. This is a legitimate reason to stay home. There's a yir'ah, right? So what do we do with that? Was he just saying a blanket statement? So Bezrat Hashem, we'll talk about that next week, about what is this concept. We're not talking about yir'at Hashem, not fear of God or awe of God or recognizing Hashem and everything. Talking about plain old-fashioned fear, anxiety, things that cannot be controlled and things that can be controlled. Good anxiety or good fear and not good fear. We'll talk about that, Bezrat Hashem, next week. As far as we're going to be in person or not, I'll let you all know before class next week. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you. Yesher koach.
Thank you, Dov. Thank you very much. Thank you. Zev, mamash.